All right, everyone, welcome. Just going to give me a second. I'm going to bring on our guest for tonight, who is Rafael Valverde, Valverde, yes, and he is works with Outlier Legal Group here in Costa Rica, and they provide residency services to people in Costa Rica. So there he is. He's just joined us. Give me a second to hook him in. Rafael, I just added you, so go ahead and you can accept it. There he is. Ah, yes, man. How you
Hi,
doing, man?
I'm
Man,
good. What about yourself?
well, I can attest to this. Rafael is a very patient person because we had some technical challenges tonight, and he hung in there, man. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me over.
I appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I just very briefly introduced you. Obviously, you're an attorney here in Costa Rica. You work for Outlier, is that correct? Outlier Legal Services?
Correct. I currently work with Outlier Legal, and the
Mm-hmm.
managing attorney of Outlier Legal. And a little bit of my background is that well, I studied law both in Costa Rica and in the U.S. Um,
Yep.
I started practicing law in the U.S. doing immigration law in
Oh,
Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo.
I did that
So you got a
for
lot of you got a
yeah.
lot of Canadians coming in for and getting residency in Buffalo or what?
Well, actually, the I for the time that I practiced law in Buffalo, I think that I had just like two Canadians, something like that.
Okay.
But the for the most part, the type of law that I did in Buffalo was removal proceedings, and that's basically a court proceedings for people who are being deported out of the U.S.
Okay.
And
Okay.
there were not that many Canadians. As I said, like there were probably a couple. Part of the work involved filing applications for residency or work visas, this type of work in the US, but for the most part, it was litigation, doing removal proceedings. And then after, I did that for about 5, 6 years in Buffalo, and then I relocated back to Costa Rica, and I worked for an international law firm doing immigration law, practicing immigration law for South America primarily,
Okay.
doing Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, and a bunch of other places. And then after that, I founded Outlier Legal Services, and I have been with this company for 6 years at this point.
All right. So you help people who come to Costa Rica and need help with their residency, and I know a lot of them. I mean, basically, almost every person I know who lives here for any length of time goes through, trying to get this done. And at the end of the day, I always say, look, you have to get good legal advice if you want to get it done and done in any sort of time frame that makes sense. I mean, when we did ours originally, I mean, we spent like 4 years trying to get our residency. It was crazy. And at the end of the day, we had a son here. We had an anchor baby, and that's how we got our residency. And that was relatively painless. Used a qualified attorney to get it done. What's the typical person you see here? Are they business owners? Are they just people who want to retire here? Is there a typical you receive? You get from foreigners, expats from the States and Europe. Is there a typical, or it's all across the board as far as business or retirees and that sort of thing?
And at least in our practice, we get all sorts of cases, all people across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be companies that are focused in some specific areas like corporate immigration or work immigration, and some people around there might focus on only on doing perhaps like a Nicaraguan, so to speak, and or
Right.
doing retirement categories. But at least like in our practice, we see people with a variety of motives and intentions to move to Costa Rica.
Sure.
and also from a multitude of countries moving here. So the significant number of
Well, let me cut you off.
retirees.
Sure. I'm sorry to cut you off. I wanted to focus on that one first issue which you brought up, which was work visas, because this has a lot of, personally, I know it can be very, very difficult to get a work visa here as say an expat from the States. Okay, let's just take that as your average example. Walk us through the process of, if I'm a foreigner, do I have to have a certain set of skills to get a work visa? And what would the process typically entail, timeline and money to get that done for a work visa?
Well, there are various options for visas. So of the option that people will apply for, because we can break them down in two categories, perhaps, and then take it from there. And I give you like some, let's say, most common examples out there.
Okay.
So we don't invest all time talking about all of them, but we can the two classes of work visas, we can divide them on people who are sponsored by a company, and then
Right.
people who are self-employed.
Okay.
And the people who are sponsored by a company, at the same time, we can break down in two categories: people who are sponsored by a company that hires them, but then also people who are sponsored by their own company. And you see,
Sure.
let's say that a decent number of expats trying to do it through their own business. But that requires employment. It requires an employment contract. We're not going to get into the people who are employed by a company, because that's a whole different process, and
Sure.
And it is a bit complicated. And considering that part of the conversation today is for people to see how they can do it themselves, or if they don't have a sponsoring company, how they can have access to residency. So
Right.
one is employment, so we can leave it at that for now, and the other ones are like a self-employment. So
right. So I come down to Costa Rica, I open a business, and then I basically, I'm running my own business, but I want to get residency. And so I basically apply for a work visa for myself, even though it's my company, right? That's basically what you're talking about?
There is an option for doing that, but there is also a self-employment. And to describe the difference is that I've seen cases, and generally we don't process these cases like this, but I've seen people processing cases like this. That is that they open a business, whatever.
Right.
So the business hires
Sure.
the person as a manager, and they do an application process as an employee. So the company is sponsoring this employee that is going to be a manager. It is your company,
Right.
you're the employee, so you go through that process. That process
Right.
is a little bit complicated from the perspective that the company needs to comply with a lot of requirements to be able to sponsor somebody.
Sure.
And we don't process those almost never. We take another avenue. And the reason why is that why we don't process those, at least in our firm, that a lot of times, particularly if people are starting a new business, it will be difficult for them to comply with all of those requirements, considering the fact that starting a business is a whole project on itself. So then the option for people to do it self-employed, there is a category in immigration law that is basically that is a self-employment category. So then it's not the business hiring you. You don't appoint yourself as a manager or a CEO of the business. So that business is not sponsoring you. You basically do it as a self-employed. So the requirements to comply for residency are much less, because the only or the main thing that you need to demonstrate is that the business is registered, and that it is your business. That's it. There are a couple of self-employment categories, and one of them is for people who are skilled, and another self-employment categories for people who are not skilled or cannot demonstrate a skill. And to give you an idea of a skill, it could be, let's say, a web designer. So to use that example, which is very popular, there's a lot of people who work on online services. So somebody in that type of a job, so to demonstrate the skill, hopefully they went design or programming or coding or something like that and do web design. So with having that college degree, to give you an idea, data confirms that the person has the skill. So that means like one of the requirements. The other requirement is to have the business register. So people under this category, they can choose to incorporate, to create a company, but they can also avoid doing that and just get registered with the revenue service as a self-employed person, and that complies with the other major requirement that is to be registered here in some shape, way, or form. So how we approach.
Well, you're making it seem real easy. You're making it seem easy. Are there? I mean, that sort of stuff. That's pretty basic stuff. What are there requirements as far as investment of capital or anything like that in that situation, or what are the other main requirements then, other than
there's no requirement,
just having a skill?
Having a skill,
Go ahead,
there are a bunch of other documents that need to be produced, but the eligibility requirements is to be a skill and demonstrate that skill, and the other requirement is to have that business registered somehow, either having a company register and being registered to pay taxes, or being registered as self-employed with the revenue service and do it that way. So when it comes to the amount of money required to invest for this category, there's no such a requirement. People, there is a very popular category out there, and people think that it might be the only category if you have your own business, which is the investor. And the investor category requires making an investment of $200,000, which for some people,
very expensive.
A lot of people, it would be very steep investment.
Most people, I would say let's say most.
Most people, yes. And,
most people, yeah.
And a problem with that is that they cannot work in the company. They cannot be put in payroll in that company, so they can only make money through dividends. So they cannot be appointed or hired as a manager or anything like that if they would like to do that. So then they need to change the category to an employment category. But people who do the application as an investor, they cannot work. So that's not a work. It's not an employment or work type of category. So this self-employed category does not require a minimum amount of money to be invested in the business. It does not require to hire Costa Ricans. It does not require to have certain licenses as a county license or a permit from the Department of Health or things like that. Those requirements will be applicable. Like for instance, if you have, let's say, a restaurant or a bakery. So when you apply as a self-employed and you have your own business, and if the grounds of the application is that you have a restaurant, so then you need to comply with the requirements, business requirements to have a restaurant, like a license from the county, or from the municipality where you're located, license from the Department of Health, so on and so forth. If you have a hotel, so then you need to be registered with the tourism board, so on and so forth. But at this self-employment, if, like for instance, if you're a programmer, if you're a web designer or a marketer or this sort type of jobs that you can do online, and you don't need a brick and mortar facility to do the work, so it just requires a testing or demonstrating the skill and being registered at the very least with the revenue service to pay for taxes.
Okay. And how long, say I come here, I have a special skill, I'm a IT security specialist, and a clearly demonstrable skill. I set up my corporation. It takes a couple of days to get a corporation. It's pretty quick now. So I'm ready to go. I come to you, give you the papers. How long does that take for me to actually get the piece of paper? I'm approved. How long is that? What's a typical timeline for that?
This type of category for self-employment, it takes roughly a year. to get it done.
Okay.
It has two major processes involved, and one is like a review by the immigration department, and another one is review by the labor department. As it is an
Okay.
employment category, most employment categories are to be reviewed by the labor department. Different or distinct from, for instance, being appointed as a manager, in your business. The self-employment category, the labor department is not concerned about you taking away a job of a Costa Rican because you're self-employed. So just by the fact of being
Right.
self-employed, you're demonstrated that you can get employment, and that you're not taking anybody's job. But nevertheless, it has to be reviewed by the labor department. So distinct from an employment category from a company that hires you. If you create your company and you hire
Right.
yourself as a manager, you need to demonstrate that you couldn't find that manager in Costa Rica. It has to go through the labor
Very hard
department,
to
the whole
do, right?
paperwork.
Very hard to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. And hence, again, like that's one of the reasons why we don't process that type of category. But going back to your question,
Sure.
like how long it takes, the review by both institutions, the immigration department and the labor department, it takes about a year to complete that whole process. Under the law, they have timelines to comply with the processing, but unfortunately, as I might be very wide known by Costa Ricans and foreigners alike, the government
Sure.
here is not capable of complying with the timelines.
It's a little slow, but okay. So I go through the process. I get it, right? I'm in. It takes a little over a year if we're lucky. I get that. Okay. Do I basically have residency status? In other words, I don't have to leave every 90 days, all those sort of benefits as well? Or do I still have to leave and come back and do all that?
Once you get the approval, you don't need to leave. During the application process, and this is a very, very good question, and we get this asked a lot, and it is what is it, a rock in your shoe, or a rock in the shoe for a lot of expats. Is that from once you file the application from an immigration perspective, you don't need to leave the country. You don't need to do the 90-day visa runs anymore from an immigration perspective.
Right.
However, and this is a huge caveat, most of the people drive, and for driving license, driver's license purposes, people, until they get a residency and get the Costa Rican driver's license, during the time that they have an application pending with the immigration department, they still need to leave every 90 days if they would like to continue having their driving privileges, to continue using the foreign driver's license. So that's the problem with that.
So just download the Uber app, guys. You download the Uber app and you're good to go. You don't just sell your car. And but yeah, that is a problem, having to leave every 90 days to keep your driver's license up to date. That's unfortunate. Used to be back in the day. I got my driver's license. I think I got it while I still had like you didn't even need residency. You could just go in and get it, right? That's too bad that's changed, because that does make it uncomfortable for people. But that's a great point, and something everybody who's listening should understand. That idea of like intramite, when your paperwork is kind of in the government's hands, and not having to leave when that is in there is a big advantage, and it's really helpful to know that you basically from an immigration point of view don't need to leave the country, need to leave Costa Rica. That's a big deal, because doing that 90-day visa run is a bit of a pain for most people. So that's great info. Well, moving on from that type of residency, the people who are pensionados, or people who want to retire here, walk me through very briefly what's the best way for them to proceed, and give us some timelines on what that looks like.
Well, the best way for people to proceed, regardless whether they're going to do it on their own or they're going to hire somebody to do it, to help them. There's people who
let's assume they hire somebody, because nobody should be doing this on their own. Let's assume everybody's hiring somebody, because there's no way. If you do it on your own, you're a fool. Like, you are a fool who just who values your time at zero because all you're going to be doing is this. So let's assume everybody's hiring you or another competent attorney. So,
All right.
so just go ahead and
So
walk us through that process.
We break the immigration process in 3 stages, and for the purposes of how we manage work here in our business. But I think that it is also a good outline for people to understand how the process works. So the 3 stages starts with a document procurement. Then it moves into filing the application and processing by the immigration department. And then the last stage is the registration. And so to elaborate into them, like the first stage, the document procurement, is preparing all of the paperwork to comply with the requirements to file for residency. In this case, since we're talking about the retired person category or the pensionado category, that paperwork includes getting the pension letter to demonstrate that you receive at least $1,000 per month. And in addition to that, all of the other documents required for that. 2 pieces of documents that are very important is the background check and a birth certificate. And for people who are bringing significant others, whether spouses or children, so then marriage certificates and birth certificates to connect those other dependents to the principal applicant. Important elements about this is that the documents, they need to be no more than 6 months old, regardless of what it is. You know, background checks, birth certificates, marriage certificates, pension letter. If the pension letter is coming from abroad, all of these documents that are coming from abroad, they cannot be older than 6 months. People ask questions and issue comments as to, well, but why my birth certificate, it is good, I shows that I'm born still and alive. Yeah, so that common sense is not applying here. Point being is that documents need to be no more than 6 months old. And and they need to be translated. They need to be authenticated in the home country. People need to learn the distinction between apostille and legalization, so they know how to authenticate the documents so they can be valid in Costa Rica. But in a nutshell, that's the document procurement stage, is getting all of the paperwork ready, the paperwork from abroad and the paperwork from here in Costa Rica. Once
I can tell you, let me just cut you off for a second there, just to give you a little bit of experience there. When somebody decides, like a little bit of a word of advice from somebody who's done it, when you decide, okay, we're going to do this, you go, you meet with the lawyer. When you finally say, okay, now we're going to get the paperwork, you need to get the paperwork. You cannot be like, okay, and slowly work it, because by the time you get the one at the end, the other one's already expired. It's like you need to go and get everything then and like hustle. Because there you are going to run into problems. You're going to run into problems getting it, you know, to the embassies for the state. I don't even know. I can't remember. Thank God. I've like blocked out, you know, the what was involved. But it's substantial. It's substantial. And so you really need to, once you decide to meet with your lawyer and you lay out all that paperwork and stuff, just the common sense word of advice is you have to go and go hard to make sure you get all that paperwork done. Because if you don't and you kick the can down the road at some point, you got to do it all over again and get all that paperwork up to date. So anyway, sorry, cut you off. I had that experience. And there's nothing worse than it's like you've done all the paperwork, you get it sent, it's FedEx down, all of this. And they're like, oh, this one's 7 months old, you need a new one. And it's like, oh man, it's nothing worse.
That's a very good point. And to add to that, people should give themselves perhaps a timeline to do this of 3 months. If we think that one of the requirements to file for residence is to have a valid visa stamp in your passport, so if we take the maximum amount of time that it is granted in a visa stamp to remain in the country is 90 days. So people should allow themselves like those 90 days. If you're going to start the residency process today and you just have 15 or 30 days on your visa, you're not going to be able to get all of that paperwork within those 30 days. So allow yourself 3 months to gather all of the paperwork. Also, considering that people have, you know, life happens. Life is not perfect. So people might have changed their names multiple times, and or they are from complicated parts of their country. Like for instance, in the
Oh yeah, I
US,
can't
there are
imagine.
states that is
Yep.
very easy to obtain documents from. There are states that are very difficult. People who are
Yep.
from Canada, Canada does legalization, and that's a little more complicated. And people coming from other parts of the world, it can become
Sure.
very cumbersome to obtain documents. So yeah, people need to focus on doing the work to get those documents. A good point also about it is that the documents can be obtained from here. People do not need to go back home to get the
Yeah.
documents. So it is possible to do the work from here, and it can save time and money, particularly money,
Sure.
like traveling back to Canada or to the UK or anywhere in Europe or Australia to get documents. It is very expensive. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Sure. Yeah,
And,
I can account to that. I mean, we did it all over the phone, basically. Phone, and I don't know, it probably was faxes back then, but fax or email to get approval and get those documents from the states that you need. I can't remember. Was it was it FBI background check they do? I don't remember what the background check was. Is that the FBI that does the background?
Yes, but that's also a very good topic to bring to people's attention, people from the U.S., because the immigration law in Costa Rica does not specify the type of background check that you can produce. And
That's right.
so
Oh
you,
yeah,
so
I
you,
remember that now.
you,
Yeah.
so you can produce something that is like from the local city police department. You can
That's
produce something
right.
from the sheriff's county
That's right.
sheriff's office, or you can produce something from the state,
Yep.
the state patrol or state police or Department of Justice of the state, or you can produce something from the federal government, an FBI background check. Problem
Yep.
is that like for instance, in our practice, in our business, as a rule of thumb, we only for people from the U.S. we only do background checks from the FBI, and this is the reason why.
Okay.
We learn through experience with the immigration department that if somebody produces something that is less than federal, anything that is not FBI, the immigration department had made an agreement years ago with the U.S. Embassy, with the U.S. consulate, because they noticed that there were, unfortunately, a number of people from the U.S. that were in Costa Rica that had a felony, and maybe the
Mm-hmm.
felony was in Florida, and they provided a background check from Washington State.
Sure.
And
Makes sense. Yep.
so it didn't show up obviously in the
Yep.
document from the Washington State. So then the immigration department, they realized that was going on. So then they made the agreement with the U.S. Embassy. So if somebody produces something that is less than FBI, the immigration department sends an inquiry to the embassy, and the embassy tells them like, well, this person is clear or this person has an issue. They don't tell them what the
Gotcha.
issue is necessarily, but it tells them like you should request a background check from the FBI. So then if the person is clean, the issue is that it delays the process. So between the communication from the immigration department to the consulate and the consulate researching and getting back to the immigration department, it passes like 6 months. So if somebody doesn't have a criminal history or an arrest record or anything like that, so it's just time wasted. Then if the person has a record, the immigration department is going to give them a notice asking for to produce a background check from the FBI. So then all of that time was wasted. So then they're going to need to engage in the expense in the time of getting a background check from the FBI. And then elaborate, like, well, I was arrested in 1971, and I was dismissed or nothing happened or whatever, but all of that can be done preemptively.
Yeah, it's just wasted time,
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why we only do FBI background checks, and the different other firms, they might have their own practices, but as I mentioned, the law does not require you to provide one from the FBI. In our experience, it's just better to provide one from the FBI.
No, that makes perfect sense. It's funny. As you were saying that, I reminded myself. My dad actually just called a friend of his at the local police station, and that got us the background check. It was from like my hometown background check, and it was, it worked. but yeah, your way makes a whole lot of sense. Just makes a whole lot of sense. All right, so they get all the paperwork in. Then what's the next? After they get all the paperwork in, they get it in. They're actually fine. They don't need to leave Costa Rica anymore. So that's a benefit right away, especially if they're retired. But as you said, the driving's an issue. Keeping your driver's license is an issue. But how long this process for a normal rentista or somebody who's pensionado? What kind of time frame are they looking at to get start to finish once they get all their paperwork in? What kind of time frame are they looking at?
With the immigration department, we estimate generally that an application for pensionado can take 6 to 9 months. Generally speaking. And certainly, in our experience, we have had cases that have extended over a much longer, like a period of time. In recent times, like let's say within the past year, in our experience, and these categories, the pensionado, they can get a process in about 6 months, and you have to put pressure to make that happen. There is an important note or comment to bring to people's attention regarding like a current events, which is the situation going on in Nicaragua, because the significant number of people from Nicaragua trying to obtain a refugee status in Costa Rica has overwhelmed the immigration department. So the immigration department had to pull resources like people from processing all other type of residencies to help the people with the refugee department to go all over those applications. So we haven't seen issues currently with processing times, but the thing with this situation in Nicaragua has been going on for 2 months. So the effects of this high volume of applications have not been felt yet, but we anticipate that processing times will be extended in the future. Like within the next year, we probably will see that the immigration department will take more than the 6 to 9 months that we have seen in recent times.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's slide over a little bit to, now we've talked about people who have special skills, retirees, the people who have a business. Okay, you got to have some. I mean, I know several people who have done it through a business. The 200,000, the typical way I've seen for 200,000 is people will buy a home, right? And they'll call that their business. That's the way I've seen for that. But actually what I'm interested in next is people who don't have money, certainly nothing in the range of $200,000. What I'm thinking of are basically kids out of college, kids who want, or people who want to come down here, adults kind of out of college, young adults, don't have money, don't necessarily have that skill that you're talking about where they can apply for, as an independent worker. Is there anything they can do to?
Under those circumstances, not much, because
not much, right?
The way that you're presenting it is a young kid out of college with no money and no skill. So if you don't have any of those, so I mean, you're in trouble, not only from the perspective of not being able to get a residency category here in Costa Rica and anywhere else in the world. You're in trouble for life, because no skill, no work, no money. That's a problem. But any immigration category in any country, immigration policies in pretty much in any country, they want to attract immigrants that are going to have a positive input in the community. Absolutely. If somebody doesn't have a skill to do a job, they cannot get work because they don't have a skill. So then it would be very difficult to migrate to any country. If people do not have money for investment, it might be very difficult. So
let's talk about the way. I get it. Like, I totally get it. But let's just talk about the way to keep the best advice we can give those people, because there are a lot of them. I mean, you live in Costa Rica, you see them. There are a lot of them, right? So is the best advice for them you know, you keep your 90-day tourist visa. You keep that current, right? You leave every 90 days, right? That's the first thing you want to do. Ideally, you wouldn't want to work. I mean, I tell people, look, you know, if you're trying to get a job at a restaurant, that's not a great idea. You know, try to work virtually. I tell people, try to work virtually to the States or something like that, where they're not actually working in Costa Rica. What do you say about that? I mean, I know I've heard there's some risks with that. Can you discuss that? So, for example, I'm a guy. I work for whatever, a web developing firm in the States, and I do that work here at the beach. You know, talk to me about what the risks are with that.
There is well, somebody on those circumstances, the risk is if they don't qualify for anything else, but there is an option that I have for you, and because we'll go back to that option in a couple of moments, but if you recall a little while ago, I mentioned that there is a self-employment category for people with a skill,
Sure.
and then there is a self-employment category for people without a skill. So we're going to review that in a couple of moments. But the people who work remotely or do online services and are able to make money, you know, from here, and they don't have a skill that they can certify, you know, they don't have a degree or anything
Right.
like that.
Sure.
And let's say that they just wing it, you know, the best advice that I can give them is just like to stay up to date with the tourist visa. But the situation will be that at some point, probably the border officer, the immigration officer at the border is going to get tired of it, and it's going to tell them like, well, I'm going to give you just 2 days of a visa or 10 days of a visa. You have abused, you know, the perpetual tourist for way too long.
Okay.
Nevertheless,
so do you see that a lot? Because I haven't seen that amongst, you know, the people I lived at the beach for a long time. A lot of people on 90-day visas. Have you seen that a lot recently, where they've started clamping down on people who are on the, you know, coming in every 90 days and they're doing that, you know, 5-10 times in a row? Have you seen a lot of people running into trouble with that?
I wouldn't say a lot, but I have seen it happen.
Sure.
I have seen it happen enough, and I have seen that the immigration officer will give them a very short-term visa, like 10 days, you know, and
Right.
also I have seen that the immigration department doing, let's say, like inspections or raids, perhaps. So the immigration department.
Where have you seen those? Where have you seen those take place? The raids. Have they been in San Jose? Or are they at the beach? Where are those taking place?
Not much. Let's say that in San Jose it happens, but it is for a different type of expat. Let's say you're able to see the immigration department making inspections, construction sites or factories or farms and things like that, looking for employers, not necessarily looking for the immigrant, not necessarily looking for the Nicaraguan, but looking for employers that are hiring people illegally. But then we have seen it at touristy places with a high concentration of expats, like Tamarindo, Santa Teresa in the Nicoya Peninsula, places like Jaco or Quepos, places like that. And so they go around, you know, like just asking people randomly, or they go to specific businesses if they get a notice that somebody is working at a business illegally. Certainly a piece of advice for people who intend to find work in that fashion is don't do it. And because people are becoming part of the problem, not part of the solution. So in places, in high touristy places, it is complicated for everybody. It's complicated for the expat, and let's say the recent college grad that just wants to be here for 3-6 months, and they want to pay rent and put beer in the fridge. So they try to get a job waiting tables. It is difficult for them. It is difficult for the locals because this is precisely what the immigration department or any immigration policy wants to prevent. They want the local businesses to hire locals. These places have beyond reasonable levels of unemployment for locals. Like Guanacaste, Punta Arenas, Limon, unemployment rates are very high in there. So it is complicated also for the locals because they don't get hired for naturally because of lack of skills. You know, they don't speak the language, or they don't have skills in customer service or the hospitality industry, so on and so forth. And then it's also difficult for the business owners, because the business owners, they need to make a choice between, do I hire qualified people that might not be compliant with immigration regulations, or do I hire locals that do not fit the profile of an employee that I need? But my suggestion is, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So if you hire illegal employees, you're breaking the law, you know, and if you're an expat and if you're breaking the law, that could be grounds for terminating your residency and deporting you, you know. And if you have a business, losing the assets of the business, it is difficult to run a business. If you're in another country, you get deported, and I have seen that happening. And if you're this college student, you just graduated from college, and I get it, you want to explore the world, you know, but I do it right. You know, I don't go around.
But can't I just teach yoga at the beach, man? Why can't I just teach a little yoga at the beach?
and you can do it. So, like, I think that this is a good opportunity to being able to explore the options of how people might be able to do something like this. Because, as I mentioned, there is an option for people who do not have a skill. In that scenario of the yoga teacher, there are certifications for yoga teachers. So then, if a yoga teacher can provide that certification, or at least an affidavit saying that, oh, I have 10 years of experience as a yoga instructor, so then you will have that a skill that will qualify you for self-employment. But if you don't have that skill, there is this category. It is called like this, a special category for self-employed people with a registered business. That's the name of it. A key word in here is a special category. This is not a residency. So distinct from residencies, you cannot get a permanent residency. A special category, you cannot have extended relatives. It is only for one person. And it is only valid for 1 year, and you can renew it as long as you meet the eligibility requirement, which is having a registered business. So if for a yoga instructor, if you don't have experience, nobody's going to hire you, right? But if you're, let's say, like a person who works online on the computer and sells services abroad, you're able to do some marketing. You didn't go to school, you're just winging it, you know, and but you have no ability to demonstrate that skill. So then you can qualify for this special category. So the only thing that you need to do is to register the business, and but you need to renew every year. Yeah, and then if you have like a long-term plans of staying in Costa Rica, so then you can do this a special category, let's say for 5 years. You renew every year, you do it for 5 years. At 5 years, you can attest that then you develop the skill. You have 5 years of experience. So then you, at that time, you can possibly change to the temporary residency of a self-employed skilled person.
Nice.
After that many years of being able to do the same thing, you know, and so then you can make the case that you develop that skill over time. And
that's great. That's great info. That's new info for me, and that's I think that alone should give some people some impetus to actually do these sort of things, because often I know people are just like, I can't do, you know, but something like that's pretty basic. You know, setting up a business, doing that's easy. You know, like you said, what's the excuse? You know, if I had known about that one, shoot, I could have done that one. You know,
yes,
so
it is possible. You know, it is possible to do it. Like a good example of a case that we had on circumstances like that is somebody who had over 10 years of experience being a florist. So no certifications for being a florist. it had
but make some really
a
nice
design.
arrangement, a beautiful arrangement.
Yes,
She
indeed,
just
yeah,
what her
indeed.
application just had pictures of flowers, right? It just had pictures of flowers on her application, right? That just a
Yeah,
photo collage.
and 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 it was possible to get a residency that way. So
Sure. Wow, there you go.
the person still has the business, it still does that, and he has been doing it for a significant number of time. And again, like a no certification, it was just making an attestation to the experience. So point being
Yeah.
is that it is possible. It is, I can tell you that it's not for the faint. What is it? The faint of heart.
The vein of heart, yeah.
And yes, because it requires some legwork to get it done, but it is possible. People just need to put their ducks in a row and to make it happen.
Hey, that's great. Honestly, that's great news because I didn't know about that one, that specific category. And what you say makes a lot of sense. I think the downsides are that it takes time, right? These things, like you said, they take a year or more oftentimes to get this approval. But the positive thing about that is when you get that application in, you don't have to leave the country, right? I mean, that's a big deal because you're in Tramite or whatever. That's a huge deal for a lot of people. So I think you've helped some people tonight to clarify those sort of issues. I think that's great.
I'm glad.
Hey, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I have some links in the notes to you yourself, your professional services as well. If people want to reach out to you, is that the best way they can go to you through your Facebook page or your website?
The best way will be through the website and doing the contact form at the website. And because we have a number of people that are going to be able to reply through emails that come through the website. And Facebook, yeah, people can contact us through Facebook. But there is we respond to inquiries in Facebook. We handle them, and but the best way to engage in communication, if people contact us through Facebook, we're gonna switch them to email.
That's right. Sure.
Very quickly, and because the materials and the information and the staff that we have, they're currently best equipped to handle communications through emails. And also,
makes total sense.
people would be able to find a lot of this information that we were reviewing today. They will be able to find it in our website as well. So there are two options in there to look at information. One is the blog, and the other one is just like to look for the immigration services, because it provides a description of these various categories that we were talking about today.
Great. Man, I thank you so much. You cleared up a lot, even for me, and I have a lot of experience here, but this is, you gave me some new info today. I think you definitely help. If anybody listened to this and was wondering how they can get residency, I think you've given a couple very clear paths that can definitely help people. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. I'm glad to help, and thank you for having me over.
All right. Have a great night. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thanks.